Erev Tov, everyone. Erev Tov. We are back. Yes, we are back. Yeah, it's been too long. Yeah, yeah, it has. It's been a little over a month. I think January 3rd. Yeah, yeah, I believe you're right. I think January 3rd was the last time we were actually together, and it was right after that we came down with the COVID, and we were off for a couple of weeks, few weeks, and we had to go a little bit longer because my voice just was not working the way it should, and neither was mine. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, neither was his, and so we had to wait another week until we were actually our vocal cords were actually in a little better shape, so that we could actually get back on here and continue with the stories. Yeah, yeah, continue with the stories, and we are reading the stories of Isaac Bashevis Singer, and we'll get back into those. And let's just see who we have in the chat room. We have Donald. We have Richard. Good to see you, Richard. We have let's see who else we got here. We have the other Richard. We have both Richards tonight. And we have, let's see, who else we got? Marshall and Shoshi and Sigma, and others watching in the background who can't get into the chat room, but we're know you're there, and we're glad to have you. So we should probably get right to the stories. Yeah, I think everybody's been waiting long enough. Yeah, okay. So let us get you back onto your camera. And it's good to be back in my place once more. Okay, so we are going to continue on with our stories from Isaac Bashevis Singer. We left off the last time way back January 3rd. We left off with Elijah the slave. And that's where we pick up tonight. So here we go. I know you've been waiting for it. In ancient times, in a distant land, there was a large city where many rich men lived. It had magnificent palaces, broad avenues, parks, and gardens. In their midst was a tiny street of broken down houses. They had narrow windows and doorways, and the roofs leaked. In the humblest of these, there lived a holy man. Tobias was his name, and his wife was called Peninnah. They had 5 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. Tobias was a scribe who copied these sacred scrolls. In this way, he was able to earn a meager living. You have to turn the page. I know I have to turn the page. Okay. But suddenly he was taken ill. Kind of like what happened back on January 3rd, huh? Yeah, something like that, yeah. Okay, so anyway. But suddenly he was taken ill and lost the use of his right hand. Soon there was no bread in the house. The larder was so empty that even the mice ran away. Man, that is poor, I'll tell you. There was nothing for the cat to catch. The boys could not go to school because they had no shoes. Tobias's clothes were in rags and feathers. When the neighbors saw the family's need, they tried to help. But Tobias refused their offers, saying, "There is a God, and he will help us. One day, Tobias's wife said to him, "If God intends to help us, it better be soon. But whatever he might do, for you to just sit at home doesn't improve matters. You must go out into the city. Even while waiting for a miracle, it's good to do something." Again, you have to merit a miracle. That's right. Okay, so man must begin, and God will help him. How can I show my face among people when I have no clothes to wear? Wait, my husband, I will take care of that. Nina went to a neighbor and borrowed a coat, a hat, and shoes. She helped Tobias dress, and truly he looked like a new man. "Now, go," Nina said, "and luck be with you." When he left, he told the children to pray that their father would not come home empty-handed. As Tobias approached the center of the city, a stranger stopped him. He was tall and had a white beard. He wore a long coat and carried a staff. "Peace be with you, Tobias," he said, and held out his hand. Tobias, forgetting he could not move his right hand, clasped the stranger's with it. He was baffled by this mysterious recovery. "Who do I have the honor of greeting?" Tobias asked. "My name is Elijah, and I am your slave." "My slave?" Tobias said, astonished. "Yes, your slave sent from heaven. Take me to the marketplace and sell me to the highest bidder." "If you have come from heaven, I am your slave," Tobias answered. "How can a slave sell his master?" "Do as I say," Elijah replied. Now, since Elijah was a messenger from God, Tobias had no choice but to obey. In the marketplace, many rich merchants gathered around Tobias and Elijah. Never before had a slave who looked so noble and wise been offered for sale. The richest and most forward of the merchants addressed him. "What can you do, slave?" "Anything you wish," Elijah said. "Can you build a palace?" "The most magnificent you have ever seen." "Even more splendid than the king's." "More splendid and bigger?" "Why should we believe you?" asked one of the merchants. Elijah took a sack of wooden blocks from his pocket, and with them built a miniature palace. He did it with such speed, and the palace's beauty was so unusual that the merchants were dazzled. "Can you build a real palace like this one?" the richest merchant asked. "A better one," said Elisha. The merchant, sensing that his slave had supernatural powers, began the bidding at once. 10,000 guldens, one shouted. 50,000, another one called. 100,000, offered a third. The highest price, 800,000 gulden, was the final offer by the richest merchant, and he paid the money to Tobias. Turning to Elijah, the merchant said, "If the real palace is as beautiful as you promise, I will make you a free man." "Very well," Elijah replied. And to Tobias he said, "Go home and rejoice with your wife and children. Your days of poverty are over." After giving praise to God and thanking Elijah for his goodness, Tobias returned home. Now, the joy of his wife and children was great. As always, Tobias gave a tenth part of his money to the poor. And even though he was now a rich man, he decided to go back to his beloved work as a scribe. Night came, and Elijah spoke to God. "I sold myself as a slave to save your servant Tobias. I pray you now to help me build the palace." Immediately, a band of angels descended from heaven. They worked all night long. When the sun rose, the palace was finished. The rich merchant came and gazed in awe. Never had an edifice of such splendor been seen by human eyes. "Here is your palace," Elijah said. "Keep your word and give me my freedom." "You are free, my lord," replied the merchant, and he bowed low before God's messenger. The angels laughed. God looked down from his seventh heaven and smiled. The angels spread their wings, and together with Elijah flew upward into the sky. And that is the story of Elijah, the slave. Okay, good story, huh? Okay, I see David has joined us, along with David's mother, Katrina, who we hope is feeling better every single minute. Okay. We go on. This is a very interesting story. It's more modern, for one thing, and it is a very unusual love story. It is called The Power of Light. During World War II, after the Nazis had bombed the Warsaw ghetto, a boy and a girl were hiding in one of the ruins. David, 14 years old, and Rivka, 13. It was winter and bitter cold outside. For weeks, Rivka had not left the dark, partially collapsed cellar that was their hiding place. But every few days, David would go out to search for food. All the stores had been destroyed in the bombing, and David sometimes found stale bread, cans of food, or whatever else had been buried. Making his way through the ruins was dangerous. Sometimes brick and mortar would fall down, and he could easily lose his way. But if he and Rivka did not want to die from hunger, he had to take the risk. That day was one of the coldest. Rivka sat on the ground wrapped in all the garments she possessed. Still, she could not get warm. Kind of sounds like your wife, doesn't it? Yeah, all right. Let's just leave my wife. Yeah, it sounds very much like my wife, and let's just leave her out of this. I couldn't help it. I had to say something. Anyway, here we go. Okay, so she could not get warm. Yeah, okay. David had left many hours before, and Rivka listened in the darkness for the sound of his return, knowing that if he did not come back, nothing remained to her but death. Suddenly, she heard heavy breathing and the sound of bundle being dropped. David had made his way home. Rivka could not help but cry, David! Rivka! In the darkness they embraced and kissed. Then David said, Rivka, I found a treasure. What kind of treasure? Cheese, potatoes, dried mushrooms, and a package of candy. And I have another surprise for you. What surprise? Later. Both were too hungry for a long talk. Ravenously, they ate the frozen potatoes, the mushrooms, and part of the cheese. They had one piece of candy. Then Rivka asked, What is it now, day or night? I think night has fallen, David replied. He had a wristwatch and kept track of day and night, and also of the days of the week and the months. After a while, Rivka asked again, What is the surprise? Rivka, today is the first day of Hanukkah, and I found a candle and some matches. Hanukkah tonight? Yes. Oh my God. I am going to bless the Hanukkah candle, David said. He lit a match, and there was light. Rivka and David stared at their hiding place, bricks, pipes, and the uneven ground. He lighted the candle. Rivka blinked her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she really saw David. His hair was matted and his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes shone with joy. In spite of the starvation and persecution, David had grown taller, and he seemed older than his age and manly. Young as they both were, they had decided to marry if they could manage to escape from war-ridden Warsaw. As a token of their engagement, David gave Rivka a shiny groschen he found in his pocket on the day the building where both of them lived was bombed. Now, David pronounced the benediction over the Hanukkah candle, and Rivka said, Amen. They had both lost their families, and they had very good reason to be angry with God for sending them so many afflictions. But the light of the candle brought peace to their souls. That glimmer of light, surrounded by so many shadows, seemed to say without words, evil has not yet complete domination. A spark of hope is still left. For some time, David and Rivka had thought about escaping from Warsaw, but how? The ghetto was watched by the Nazis day and night. Each step was dangerous. Rivka kept delaying their departure. It would be easier in the summer, she often said, but David knew that in their predicament they had little chance of lasting until then. Somewhere in the forest there were young men and women called the partisans, who fought the Nazi invaders. David wanted to reach them. Now, by the light of the Hanukkah candle, Rivka suddenly felt renewed courage. She said, "David, let's leave." "When?" "When you think it's the right time," she answered. "The right time is now," David said. "I have a plan." For a long time, David explained the details of his plan to Rivka. It was more than risky. The Nazis had enclosed the ghetto with barbed wire and posted guards armed with machine guns on the surrounding roofs. At night, searchlights lit up all possible exits from the destroyed ghetto. But in his wanderings through the ruins, David had found an opening to the sewer which he thought might lead to the other side. David told Rivka that their chances of remaining alive were slim. They could drown in the dirty water or freeze to death. Also, the sewers were full of hungry rats. But Rivka agreed to take the risk. To remain in the cellar for the winter would mean certain death. When the Hanukkah light began to sputter and flicker before going out, David and Rivka gathered their few belongings. She packed the remaining food in a kerchief, and David took his matches and pieces of lead pipe for a weapon. In moments of great danger, people become unusually courageous. David and Rivka were soon on their way through the ruins. They came to passages so narrow that they had to crawl on hands and knees. But the food they had eaten and the joy of the Hanukkah candle had awakened in them, gave them the courage to continue. After some time, David found the entrance to the sewer. Luckily, the sewer had frozen, and it seemed that the rats had left because of the extreme cold. From time to time, David and Rivka stopped to rest and to listen. After a while, they crawled on, slowly and carefully. Suddenly, they stopped in their tracks. From above, they could hear the clanging of the trolley car. They had reached the other side of the ghetto. All they needed now was to find a way to get out of the sewer and to leave the city as quickly as possible. Many miracles seemed to happen that Hanukkah night. Because the Nazis were afraid of enemy planes, they had ordered a complete blackout. Because of the bitter cold, there were fewer Gestapo guards. David and Rivka managed to leave the sewer and steal out of the city without being caught. At dawn, they reached the forest where they were able to rest and have a bite to eat. Even though the partisans were not very far from Warsaw, it took David and Rivka a week to reach them. They walked at night and hid during the days, sometimes in granaries and sometimes in barns. Some peasants stealthily helped the partisans and those who were running away from the Nazis. From time to time, David and Rivka got a piece of bread, a few potatoes, a radish, or whatever the peasants could spare. In one village, they encountered a Jewish partisan who had come to get food for his group. He belonged to the Haganah, an organization that sent men from Israel to rescue Jewish refugees from the Nazis in occupied Poland. This young man brought David and Rivka to the other partisans who roamed the forest. It was the last day of Hanukkah, and that evening the partisans lit 8 candles. Some of them played dreidel on the stump of an oak tree, while others kept watch. From the day David and Rivka met the partisans, their life became like a tale in a storybook. They joined more and more refugees who all had one desire: to settle in the land of Israel. They did not always travel by train or bus. They walked. They slept in stables, in burned-out houses, and wherever they could hide from the enemy. To reach their destination, they had to cross Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Yugoslavia. Somewhere at the seashore in Yugoslavia, in the middle of the night, a small boat manned by a Haganah crew waited for them, and all the refugees with their meager belongings were packed into it. This all happened silently and in great secrecy because the Nazis occupied Yugoslavia. But their dangers were far from over. Even though it was spring and the sea was stormy and the boat was too small for such a long trip, Nazi planes spied the boat and tried without success to sink it with bombs. They also feared the Nazi submarines, which were lurking in the depths. There was nothing the refugees could do besides pray to God, and this time God seemed to answer their prayers because they managed to land safely. The Jews of Israel greeted them with love that made them forget their suffering. They were the first refugees who had reached the Holy Land, and they were offered all the help and comfort they could be given. Rivka and David found relatives in Israel who accepted them with open arms, and although they had become quite emaciated, they were basically healthy and recovered quickly. After some rest, they were sent to a special school where foreigners were taught modern Hebrew. Both David and Rivka were diligent students. After finishing high school, David was able to enter the Academy of Engineering in Haifa. And Rivka, who excelled in languages and literature, studied in Tel Aviv. But they always met on weekends. When Rivka was 18, she and David were married. They found a small house with a garden in the Ramat Gan, a suburb of Tel Aviv. I know all this because David and Rivka told me their story on Hanukkah evening in their house in Ramat Gan about 8 years later. The Hanukkah candles were burning, and Rivka was frying potato pancakes served with applesauce for all of us. David and I were playing dreidel with their little son, Menachem Eliezer, named after both of his grandfathers. David told me that this large wooden dreidel was the same one the Pattersons had played with on that Hanukkah evening in the forest in Poland. Rivka said to me, if it had not been for that little candle David brought into our hiding place, we wouldn't be sitting here today. That glimmer of light awakened in us a hope and a strength we didn't know we possessed. We'll give the dreidel to Menachem Eliezer when he is old enough to understand what we went through and how miraculously we were saved. And that is the end of the story. Did you notice that a lot of his stories are about Hanukkah? Yeah, I did notice that. He seems to really like Hanukkah. Yeah, and who can blame him? Who can blame him? Okay, so we are going to take our break now. And when we come back, we shall read the next story, which is called Growing Up. So, we will be back in 6. Please stay tuned. We will be back.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back, just as we promised. Okay, so let's clear up a few things first. Okay, the first thing is Richard was making a comment about the lead-in music, and of course, he should be, it should sound very nice because he actually wrote it. It's very nice of him to allow us to use it for our shows. And those who are asking about the background, yes, that is a beautiful background back there. That is the view of the hotel, and that was made possible by Marshall. So, thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Richard. And let's get on with our stories. There is more and more to read yet. Okay. So, you know what else I found out? There is another book of stories from him. So as soon as we finish this one, we can go right into the next one. So we are just a little over halfway through this one, though. We got a ways to go yet. Okay, so as we promised, this one might be a cliffhanger. We shall see, because it actually has chapters. Okay. This one is called Growing Up. The whole night I kept dreaming. What I dreamed, I couldn't recall later. But they must have been fantastic dreams full of youthful valor, for I awoke feeling strong and cheerful. Everything was pleasurable. Washing with the cold water at the sink, putting on the gabardine and fringe garment, even praying from the new prayer book with the large type. At the age of 11, I already understood the meaning of the Hebrew words. Oh, how goodly are thy tents, Yaakov, thy tabernacles, O Israel. As for me, in the abundance of thy loving kindness will I come into thy house. The thing that we say every time we come into the show, right? That's right, absolutely. Okay, so we go on. In my fantasy, I envisioned a city of Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. The Mashiach had come and the resurrection had taken place. I donned the robes of a priest about to offer a sacrifice. I saw the altar, the table of the showbread, the ark, the cherubim, all in gold, and beyond stretched Har Zion, and the mighty city of Jerusalem, with its walls, gates, and flat-roofed houses. King David again occupied his royal throne, and his son Solomon learned the language of lions, tigers, eagles, and the woodcock. The light of the sun was 7 times brighter than ever. A day was as long as a year. Everything that had ever existed once again existed. All my ancestors, going back to Adam and Chava, had risen from their graves. There was no more death or injustice, only happiness and divine revelation. At the same time, I knew full well that all this was just in my head. Actually, I was in Warsaw. My father was a poor neighborhood rabbi. The land of Israel belonged to the Turks. The temple lay in the ruins. David, Solomon, Bathsheba, and the Queen of Sheba were all dead. My friend was not a prince of the kingdom of Israel, but Black Fievel, whose father was a porter in Janash's bazaar and whose mother sold crockery in the marketplace. Until just a few weeks ago, I had attended the cheder on Torah Street, but I had stopped going because my father couldn't afford the 2 rubles a month tuition. I rushed through my prayers and breakfast. For weeks, Fievel and I had been formulating a secret, outlandish plan. This was the day I was to become a writer and Fievel a printer. I would soon publish my first book, all of 16 pages long. Its price would be 2 kopecks. Fievel and I had figured it all out with precision. There were at least 50,000 boys and girls in Warsaw who liked to read storybooks. If every boy and girl brought my book, we would take in 100,000 kopecks, or 1,000 rubles. With this sum, we could buy our own printing shop and publish additional books. we would accumulate so much money that we would be able to take a ship to the land of Israel. This trip was vital, not only for us, but for all Jews in the world. Someone had told me that in Jerusalem there was a cave where Kabbalists sat seeking the hidden name of God that would bring the Messiah. This name had come in a dream to me. Isaac, son of Pinchat Menachem. An angel with 6 wings had shown himself to me and uttered the name, which consisted of 24 letters. The angel had warned me not to utter the name in any other place except Jerusalem. If my lips let it slip in Warsaw, the sky would turn red and the whole world would be consumed by fire. For a while, I had kept this secret to myself, but one day I blurted it out to Feivel. It happened while we were walking on Senator Street to see the courtyard of the Warsaw Firemen, its huge fire bell, and the tower with the circular balcony where the firemen walked around and around on the lookout for fighters. This tower was so tall that the firemen, in fully grown men, looked like a toy from below. When the sunlight struck his brass helmet, it glowed as if it were on fire. The situation was this. Some time before, Black Feivel had found a silver 40 kopeck piece and had confided to me his delight over the windfall. Feivel was a year older than I, but he listened to me as if I were his senior. He loved to hear my stories. Not a day went by that I didn't make up some tale about kings, demons, savages, giants, dwarfs, treasures, villains. I had boasted to him that I was versed in the Kabbalah. Feivel's faith in me was like that of a Chassid in his Rebbe. I had told him that I was possessed by the spirit of Yosef de la Reina, a saint who centuries before had captured Satan and put him in chains. Had Satan remained so confined, Rabbi Yosef could have brought the Mashiach at that time, but he had taken pity on Satan, who had cried and bemoaned his fate and pleaded with Rabbi Yosef for something to eat or drink, or at least a pinch of snuff. When Rabbi Yosef gave him the snuff, Satan broke into a hellish laughter and 2 sparks shot from his nostrils. Right after that, the chains crumpled from his body, and he flew away with 10,000 demons to Mount Seir, near Sodom, where the dark powers hold sway. I told Feivel that Rabbi Yosef's soul had entered my body and that I was destined to carry out what he had commenced. Chapter 2. The practical plan was this. Black Feivel had found an incredible bargain for a gulden, a case of rubber type, a pad for ink, and a kind of composing stick into which to set the rubber type to form words. There was even a brush with which to pull proofs. Fievel would serve as the typesetter and printer, and I would be the author. Until we launched ourselves on a grander scale, I would get the paper from Father's notebook into which he wrote his interpretations of the Talmud. All we lacked was a place to do our work. But after an intense search, Fievel found what he was after, a Chassidic study hall that stood empty all day. It was only used in the mornings and evenings for services. I knew full well that what we were doing was fraught with danger. The beadle or someone else was liable to drop in and catch us at it. Nor would it be easy to go around selling these books, but Fievel and I had grown so enthused about the writing, the publishing, and the big profits that we had become bedazzled by it all. Fievel had already set my name as well as the title page of my first book, Into the Wild Forest. This was the story of a boy, Hummel, whose mother had died and whose father had remarried to a wicked woman. The stepmother caused the boy so much grief that he ran away from home and went to live in the woods. He found a hollow in a big tree, a 1,000-year-old oak, and he settled there. He lived on berries, mushrooms, and the other foodstuffs found in the forest. Everything would have been fine, but one night Hummel heard the soft moaning of a girl. It turned out that this hollow was the entrance to an underground cave where a monster by the name of Mordush lived. This monster had kidnapped a girl, Rivka, the daughter of a wealthy man, and was trying to force her to become his wife. But Rivka was engaged already to a young man named Ben-Zion, a rabbi's son, and she didn't want to trade him for an old villain who had only one eye in the middle of his forehead and who ate human flesh. Mordush even tried to make a cannibal out of her. But Rivka swore that she would sooner starve to death than to eat the flesh of a human being who had just recently lived, hoped, and loved. I was supposed to plan out the story to its end this very night. Ben-Zion had to rescue Rivka and take revenge upon Mordush, and Hummel also had to receive some sort of reward for uncovering the crime. But somehow my creative juices dried up at this point, and I couldn't continue the thread of this story. In the process of writing, I had grown so attached to Rivka that I desired her for myself. Actually, in this story, Hummel, who was really myself, was only 11 years old, and Rivka was 16. And this would hardly have been a suitable match, but what prevented me from adding a few years to Hummel? I had to find some way to dispose of Ben-Zion. Should he die of longing? Should he become A hermit? Should he forget Rivka and marry the daughter of some magnate? I had just launched my writing career, and already I had fallen into a literary dilemma. When I went down later to meet Weivel, I envied the boys playing tag, hide and seek, cops and robbers and nuts, who didn't have to worry about plots and stories. I had prematurely assumed the duties of a writer and publisher. A printer already awaited my efforts, and I knew somehow that I would bear this burden as long as I lived. And that, my friends, is where we are going to stop for tonight. Next week, we pick up on chapter 3. So there you go, Donald. We have a cliffhanger. I know you love those cliffhangers. So, okay. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Don't forget, tomorrow night is the Rabbis Discuss with Rabbi Ansel and Rabbi Ariel. And then on Wednesday is the Torah Study in Depth, where we are starting the study of Parashat Tetzaveh. And Friday is, of course, Kabbalat and Ma'ariv Shabbat service at 8 p.m. Eastern. And the Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. Eastern is Shakrit Musaf. And then, God willing, right back here on Monday for chapter 3 of our story and more stories after that. So, thank you everybody for being here. And we will simply say, Laila Tov.